Hello, everyone. Welcome. Give everyone a minute to get logged in here. Thanks for joining our session. All right, once we start seeing the numbers go up here, we will get things kicked off and going.
Yeah, Bruce, a lot of people are going to be coming from Bruce Bauman's session, and he's really doing some great stuff looking at like kind of the advanced things you can do with templates and their customizations. It's really cool stuff.
Ooh, that's
So I imagine
awesome.
nobody's going to want to get out of there any sooner. They're going to want to catch it all.
Wow, we'll give them that time to pop over. I'm not seeing the number go up yet, so we'll just give it a quick sec here. And if you are here, let us know in the chat. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're joining from today. It's great to have you here. If you're just joining, we're just giving everyone a second to pop over from the other sessions that are likely just finishing up now. So I think they are pretty back to back, aren't they?
They are.
That's right. Right. Oh, there we go. A couple people trickling in. There we go, Jeremy.
There we go.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm seeing people pop in now. Guessing the other sessions are starting to wrap up. So great to have you here. I will get going with us. You're in this session now, and we're in a skills lab on unlocking the power of data, exploring API tools for Luminate Online and TeamRaiser with Jeremy Reynolds. My name is Kimberly Cote. I'm a customer success manager here in our Blackbaud Canada team. I'll be your host today, so I'll be off in the background, just keeping an eye on things for sort of any questions coming up, any issues people are running into. And so if you have any questions there, just let me know in the chat. Use the Q&A for any specific questions you have coming in. And Jeremy will be sharing his screen today to take us through the slides. So to get us going, I'd like to share a little bit about Jeremy. Really great to have you here, Jeremy, from Streetlight Digital today. So Jeremy's been in the Luminate Online ecosystem since before it was Luminate. So I know some of us go back pretty far with this solution. Jeremy has more than 2 decades experience diving deep on technology, digital comms, and strategy for nonprofits, agencies, and retail businesses alike. And nothing makes him happier than seeing an organization transform how they connect with people and raise support, whether it's by pushing the boundaries of what your tech stack can do, geeking out over how to get the data to make sense, which I love, and work for you, or making a digital experience that really sings from start to finish. Jeremy's a technical consultant and a developer at Streetlight Digital, which is a marketing agency that focuses on nonprofit fundraising, peer-to-peer, and direct response. And now in that role, Jeremy works with clients to find places where tech isn't working for them as well as it can, putting together a plan when you know you need something but can't quite put your finger on what the best solution is. Prior to Streetlight, Jeremy spent a decade at Zero Prostate Cancer as the director of digital marketing and then the senior software engineer. In short, he acted as a magic wand that made problems go away, and he built out a range of P2P programs, including DIY, Run Walk, Endurance, Advocacy Summit, awareness campaigns, and development campaigns. Kind of runs the gamut. Along the way, he's stretched the capabilities of platforms like Blackbaud, Luminate Online, and TeamRaiser. And I'm sure many of you know Jeremy. He's become a familiar face in community forums and events like BBCon, and you've probably seen him here at BB Dev Days in previous years leading sessions as well. Jeremy is joining us from Fort Wayne, Indiana, where he lives with his wife and 2 teenagers. And the Reynolds crew kicks back with gaming sessions, roasting s'mores around the backyard campfire. Invite us next time. Or catching the latest sci-fi series like Andor. Jeremy's thrilled to be with us today and looks forward to the conversation. So thanks again for popping in, folks. I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy from here.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the session. Today, I have been scoping who all is kind of trickled in right now. And let me get my screen share here. And we're going to kind of do a little bit of hopefully something for everyone. Round robin around all the things that you would need to know about using the API when you're working in Luminate Online. So as Kimberly just kindly introduced, I'm Jeremy, and I hit the wrong button. I'm Jeremy, and I am. Many of you guys know me already. The What we've been doing is using Luminate and Razor's Edge and the different fundraising platforms like Just Giving and everything else that's out under the sun to try to connect with our people, right? That's what we do all day. That's what all of us do all day. And the better we can make the experience for them, where they can step into the site and have no real friction. It just, everything is there. It kind of shows up for them without them looking for it. The better they're going to feel, the stronger the relationship with the people in our nonprofit organizations, the more effective they'll be at fundraising, and we all do better, right? And the API, what we're going to be looking at today is APIs, and we're really going to try to have something for everybody here. If you're somebody who's watching this on YouTube or is kind of just kicking around the different sessions right now, and you aren't really even sure what an API is, we'll touch on that. We'll touch a little bit on exactly what is going on behind the scenes, and then we're going to kind of scale up the complexity to get into, depending on how much time we've got on hand, to get into some of the more advanced things that you can do with the API. We'll be looking at some code examples. We'll be looking at some of the tools that you can use. We'll be looking at what is the process you go through when you're debugging and things like that. Again, it's all going to come down to the amount of time that we have, though. So hopefully we can get through a good amount of it. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. But don't worry about waiting on Q&A. If you've got questions throughout the entire session, please do. I'll kind of be looking over at the other monitor here occasionally to see if we've got some new questions and answer them on the spot. Anything we missed, we'll try to get here at the end. So just running things down, though, let's take a look at exactly what we're talking about when we're working with an API, right? APIs are all about a easy way for computers to talk to each other, whether that's a computer that's on a server like your website, or it's a computer that is a separate piece of software like Razor's Edge, or it's a computer that is running your peer-to-peer network like you are with Luminate and TeamRaiser. And they have their own little ways of communicating with one another. What we're looking at mainly today is going to be REST APIs, and they all, depending on exactly what you want to accomplish, they all have different strengths. They all have different complexities that you'd have to address. When we're talking about the API within the Luminate community, we're usually talking about one of two different things. We're talking about either SOAP or REST. And you don't need to know what either of those stand for. The key here is to kind of wrap your head around exactly what one you would use, because there's a good amount of documentation and a good amount of software built into Luminate and TeamRaiser to work on both of those systems. So one of the ways I would look at this is when you've got a computer in the background that thinks about tons and tons of data and thinks about how does it put things together on pages. It's very technical, it's very machiney. We're talking almost like you've got an ocean of data. There is all kinds of details. Like if you're looking in the nonprofit space, you've got donation details and where were the bank transactions coming through and was it remitted and did they get acknowledged? If you've got fundraising, you've got family members, you've got teams, you've got who's the team captain, what's the login information. If you're looking at the mail, you're looking at deliverability when you're talking about email, or postal service when you're talking about post addresses. There's all kinds of data. It comes in all kinds of form. It's like an entire ocean. And the computers behind the scene, the big servers, what we might call big iron, they work with SOAP, which is a protocol that gets them get really into, it's almost like you've got a scoop and you can get a pail in the bucket in the ocean and you can pull out the data that you want and then put it into your system. It's still very free form. It doesn't have a lot of order to it. You have to provide that yourself. So that's SOAP. And it's when the big weird magic computers in the background are talking to each other. REST is kind of like this little water bottle in the front. It still has the data in it, but it's a lot more straightforward for some geek off the street to step up to it and look at it. Now, instead of this gigantic sea of zeros and ones, we actually know what we're looking at. We've got labels. You know, just like this water bottle has a colorful label, it has a logo, it has a name, it's got the water inside, it's got a certain size. All those different attributes are very structured. You know when I say a bottle what you're thinking about. If I just happen to get a pail full of water from the ocean, maybe you've got a starfish in there, maybe there's seaweed. You know, you never know what you're going to get. With a bottle, you know what you're going to get because it's very structured. That's what REST is. And REST is what we're going to be talking about today because for most of us in this room, we are probably going to be front-end web developers, or we're going to be peer-to-peer program managers, and we're primarily focused on the people that come in contact with our websites. How do we make those websites work differently? How do we make them work smarter? How do we spit out the details that we want onto the page? And that's REST. SOAP is more like if you're building an application, you're building a data warehouse, or maybe you're building an Android or an iPhone app, and you really are getting deep into the stream. You can actually use both these protocols to kind of get the data across. It's just that you probably, if you're in this room, never would with REST. What we're trying to do when we're talking about an API is we are starting out here on the left with Blackbaud and TeamRaiser, and I got the old logo from before it was TeamRaiser. And we've got all the information that's in that system. It works the way that they've set it up. It's using SOAP and stuff in the background to actually do its thing, and templates like Bruce was just talking about in his session. Catch it on YouTube if you didn't see it. It's good stuff. And you're taking all of that. We want to, after the page has been built, we, the developers, are going to use a handful of different tools to reach into that same system that was serving up all the ocean of data and grab just the specific things that we need so that we can then take it and spit it out onto our page as HTML and CSS. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can do this, but in the core, we're going to get what's in the cloud. We're going to mess around with it somehow in our development stack, usually using some form of jQuery or JavaScript, Angular, Vue, or React, some sort of JavaScript framework that can grab things in real time and update the page. And then we're spitting it out into HTML and CSS. Okay, I'm flying through this, but one of the things you might notice when you look at this is you might be, if you're younger or kind of newer to this hardcore web development stuff, you might be like, well, JavaScript I've heard of, but it's a little frightening. jQuery I've used a little bit and I've gotten a couple things to work. React, I don't know what that is, and I'm afraid, right? And Angular, wait, was it Angular or AngularJS? I can't remember. There are all kinds of different tools. They can all be used. They're used in different ways. And for this presentation, we're not going to get too in the weeds about exactly how each one of those is used. The key that you need to take away is if you're comfortable with jQuery and you want to get into the API, you can do that. If you know vanilla JavaScript, you know older JavaScript like ECMA 5 or ECMA 6, you can use that and just write JavaScript to do your stuff, especially with the modern browsers and their ability to reach into APIs on their own. The latest in technology that's built into Luminate is something called AngularJS. It was the very first version of a widely used system called Angular. Google put it together, and we're using basically the prototypical version of it. And stay tuned, there's actually a tool that you can use if you're doing that. You can still do some really cool things, even though it's old. But if you know what you're doing, you could actually even use the newest version of Angular, the newest version of Vue, the newest version of React, and you could actually use those APIs to do your thing there too. So when we're talking about data, one of the things that you got to think about is we're talking to this remote system. Even though we're dealing with water bottle, there's a lot that's actually been pretty well defined. We still do get some curveballs from the system. When we ask for something, it can give us something that's rather structured, almost like a bullet list where there are categories and subcategories, and there's a logical, very much there's a label on the water bottle, there's an ink color, we know those things. Other times, it's not well defined at all, because when you think about your event series, if you've got 15 different events, is there a difference if I list them off between, chronologically, what's the soonest versus the oldest, or just randomly, alphabetical order, what's raising the most? We don't know. So when we're dealing with an API, one of the key things that we're going to be doing is figuring out how structured is that data and basically accounting for in this situation where I just asked for a list of events, it could come in any order. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4, but I don't know what the 1, 2, 3, 4 is. In other situations, like asking for the details of an event, I might actually have very structured data that tells me very specifically that we got apples are a medium-sized fruit as they're pears and oranges, smaller fruits are like grapes. We're going to be building code out that lets us, first of all, look at the documentation, understand what is it going to send to us, and try to figure out why. And then secondly, once it's sent to us, what do we do with all that? So let's get into a little bit of this and look at exactly when you ask for that bottle of water from the server, how is it actually going to format it? The good news is that there is just all kinds of documentation on our website for Blackbaud's website, their developer website, for all of their APIs. And what you'll notice here at the top is the REST and the SOAP API each have their own little sections, and they're all very different because of what they're doing is, again, drop in the bucket, very structured requests as opposed to REST, where it's actually broken down in a very particular way, okay? Just looking at this 1,000-foot view, what we'll take a look at next is how to install a really popular library called the LuminateExtend library that was built quite a while ago to help us kind of reach in and take care of some of the security and some of the communication protocol stuff for us. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of look at when we're looking at in LuminateExtend and we make a request, exactly what's going out to the computer, what's coming back to us, what should we expect? And that's what this documentation is meant to do. There's a lot of details in this documentation. Since I'm flying through a lot of this, you'll actually find a full description of exactly what are the difference between clients and server APIs, what is the difference between the SOAP and the REST. If we want to get set up, how does Luminate work in terms of what system kicks off first when I look at the web page of a run walk? Then when I click on the donate button, what next system kicks off to get my login info? Then once that's done, what system gets triggered next? And all the way down to payment. Blackbaud's been doing a lot of work lately on upgrading the payment forms to include new wallets and to be PCI 4 compliant. Along the way, there's actually a fairly significant amount of new content that's been added to this. So even if you're a graybeard like I am, you'll want to take a look if you're getting into customized like donation workflows, TeamRaiser registration workflows, you're going to want to actually take a look at this because it's going to tell you exactly what triggers when so that you know I need to ask this way, followed by this way, followed by this way, followed by this way. So there's a lot of getting started and details and references here to when you reach out to the system, what does it do to prove you are who you say you are, right? What does it do to make sure that when you ask for something from your website, you are who you say you are, and it can safely send that detail across to you, something called cross-domain access, right, or CORS. When you have something go wrong, what is the system likely to say back to you? These are kind of your global things that you can find in this reference. And they are somewhat specific to individual systems may have their own unique codes. After all, you don't need to worry about donation failed when you're talking about did somebody write a letter to their senator, right? So that's the first step here, is to kind of get familiar with this and get an understanding of exactly how does the system work? And then most of the time, once you're into this, you're actually going to dive deeper into each of these other sections, which are also here on the REST homepage, where we actually find out very specific things I might want to do with Luminate. And I might want to, so for example, I might want to get a list of TeamRaisers based on what is a search for their name. So get TeamRaisers by info is the actual command, the magic word that we will use when we're asking for that from the system. And it has a lot to look at here, right? What is going on? We'll back up in a moment and kind of break this out a little bit. But Couple of things that you're going to notice is on all of these different pages, there are two systems where you can communicate with their remote servers. So remember, I said there's REST and there's SOAP. That's about like, am I getting an ocean of content versus very defined content? Just within that world of well-defined content, we also have two sets of commands. There's the commands that you can actually have somebody in this room who has no relationship with our organization go ahead and ask the remote system. Like, let's say, Bob on the street wants to say, hey, Luminate, where do I go to log in? He can do that. We don't need to have a special security badge for him to do that, right? Whereas if we wanted to get a list of every single gift that's been given to the system on behalf of Larry, Bob, probably just being a geek off the street, shouldn't be trusted with that kind of a question. So there's two groups of commands throughout this. There's the client one, which generally speaking is an untrusted person outside of the organization where you can maybe vet them with a password, but you're not going to be like, you're not getting inside Fort Knox with those client ones. It's meant for people who maybe if they know the secret password, you'll tell them where their page is, but you're not going to give them your whole list of donors. The second one that you have is the server servlet. And that is when you're talking about your internal systems, your WordPress or your Drupal website that wants to actually reach over and say, hey, I have somebody logged in over here. Can you give me some details about them? Right? That actually is quite a bit more sensitive detail. And so it actually has its own little system. And what's cool about our API is a lot of these different systems can actually be done either by a person on the street in the right circumstance or our own equipment in the background, like our website. And so you'll see various going down the line here. You're going to see some of these only have a server one, other ones only have a client one, and you'll see others that have both, right? HTTP methods supported, don't worry about that. But the other one that you'll need to know is requires authentication. So remember, I said that we can grab somebody off the street, and if they know the secret word and they show us our ID, maybe we'll tell them about their own stuff, right? You'll see on some of these requests, it'll say, yeah, I want them to do that. I want to make sure this person is who they say they are before I tell them, here's your home number, right? So you'll see these four things at the top. You don't really have to worry about the methods supported. Client servlet is when you're talking about somebody external for the most part, in the web browser most likely. Server servlet is when you're talking about more trusted systems like your websites. And then requires authentication in both cases is whether or not this request has to actually have some sort of a sign-in or been approved or known a password. In general, your server is either going to be whitelisted through your system by telling the system ahead of time, hey, this is definitely our computer. When you hear from it, believe it, it really is us. Or it's also going to have a password. For the most part, servlet is always going to have some form of authentication, whereas client, it can really just depend on exactly what you're asking for. Okay, so that's a lot to digest, right? Let's take a pause, and let's say that you would like to get into doing all this. Let's take a pause on all of these huge amounts of words and details, and let's step back for a moment and do something a little bit simpler. Let's take a look at, let's say you want to get set up doing API. You've never done it before. How do you actually do that? And just in case you missed some of this, you can actually find all of this back in our reference for the setup. You'll actually find what we're about to walk through here as far as what do you need to do to whitelist yourself. So this is your Luminate Online login. And when you've logged into the site, depending on who you are, what services you have, this is this is a sandbox service, so it has all kinds of stuff you probably haven't seen before. Don't worry about that. When you are setting up for the API, you're going to need to know your API key. And if you have most level of ability to administrate the system and you go into setup, you'll see site options here at the top. A lot of stuff in here that you can blow up the earth with, so be careful when you go into this page specifically. You're setting some major settings. You're going to click on Open API Configuration, which is a lot less scary. I'm not going to click on edit because it's actually going to show our secret key and I don't want to show that off, right? But what we're looking for is this little doohickey right here. In this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's not all that sensitive of a term because almost anybody who knows what they're doing can look at your website if you're using API and figure out what this number is. But you will need it a lot of times for most of the stuff that you're going to be doing. So the first step when you're going to use APIs, go in here, and if you don't have one already, set up a key. If you do have one already, go ahead and make a note of it. The second thing that you'd need to do is whenever you're actually working outside, like with a website, even your own websites, is you need to tell the system, okay, this is my actual website. If it asks for details from JavaScript, go ahead and give it the answer. And this is really simple. You just hit the edit JavaScript configuration and you'll see this has got years and years of stuff in it. And you'll add your own website.com, to this, telling Luminate, hey, when you see a request for an API question come in, go ahead and check what website it's coming from. And if it's mrhacker.ru.sk, don't answer his question. But if it's from my website, go ahead and do it. Okay. That doesn't cover absolutely everything, but the very best thing it does is it keeps some bad guy from going out there and making a phishing website that looks just like ours and then is actually getting the straight dip from the system to make it look even more like it's us. That's why it does it this way. So just stepping back, you need your API key and whatever website that you're using, you'll need to have on this list. For the most part, that's probably going to be your TeamRaiser site and maybe your secondary sites like your missional website or other systems. Once you've got that set up, the next thing that you're going to want to do is use the widely used, how do I not have this right here bookmarked? Hold on, I'm looking in my other window and that's wild. I don't have it bookmarked right. LuminateExtend is the best thing since sliced bread when you're actually working with the Cambia or the Luminate API. This is a library that was built, if going back before when I said that there's a range of technologies you can use. jQuery back in the day was doing some really cool stuff that was pretty hard to do unless you're a very advanced programmer. And this was written at a time when that was made. So that if you can use jQuery, you install a couple different files onto your site, and you can be up and running with a really simple way to reach into Luminate and ask for API questions. Okay. To get this set up, you're going to want to go to github.com/Cambia/LuminateExtend. I will have that in the end of this. And the LuminateExtend, you will have two things that you're going to want to do. Luminate by default already has jQuery built into it. So you don't necessarily need to put jQuery on it, though sometimes you'll want a newer version. But what you will need to do is get LuminateExtend.js, and then you'll also need to build on your website a server page that does all kinds of groovy security stuff in the backend. Okay, so what you're going to do is when you're looking at Luminate.com, or when you're looking at GitHub.com, you can actually go into this raw detail right here, and all you have to do is copy it, and then you're going to go into your Luminate instance, and you're going to create a page builder page with that exact same name. We want the name to be LuminateExtendServer.html. So you're just going to create a new page, and you're going to call it that. And I got there. Keep switching back from a Mac to a PC today, so I keep on getting the backwards things. So you're going to make your Luminate server, and you're going to go ahead and I'm not going to save it, but you'd save it and you get into the editing mode where you can actually create a page, and you're going to ultimately create, you'll see almost every server that's been set up ahead of time is going to go ahead and have this. And all you're going to do is open it up and copy paste this wall of profanity into your Luminate Online TeamRaiser page or page builder page, and then save it. And then make sure you've published it. And that's what's going to do all the magic in the background to let the systems talk to each other and do all that security goodness. Once you've done that, you're then going to go into your page wrapper. One way or the other, you're going to build your entire page wrapper system so that you actually have some sort of a reference to the LuminateExtend library. So you'll see in this long details, this has a really exhaustive description of exactly how you use this. We're going to hit a high view of it. But what you're going to look for is you're going to look for this, including the library section here. And you can use jQuery. There's already one that's kind of hosted in the cloud on Cloudflare that's really fast. A lot of times I just use that. If you want, you could also save it to your FTP and do it locally. It's up to you. I usually just use this. So all you need to do is add the script tag to your page wrapper. So just back up again. You've put the server on there. Then you are going to include this JavaScript file in your page wrapper. And then you are ready to go. You're ready to start making some code. I'm going to take a quick look here in the chat because I see a couple questions. So isn't the client servlet only accessible by the client, the person logged into the website? That's a great question. So it is actually dual purpose. When we say client, we actually just mean somebody who is connected, right? Usually when we're talking about a client at like our ad agency, we're talking about somebody who comes and does business with us. A client could be somebody that has a login. It could be a trusted person. It could be somebody on our TeamRaiser site that has a login, and they are, once they're logged in, going to want to see their list of donors and their fundraising tools and participant center. That is a client. But it's also a client when it's just a random person in the middle of nowhere who, how do we make sure that some hacker doesn't have a bot that keeps scraping our site and just hammers our server over and over again, asking for requests? You may not know this, but there's something called a denial of service request. It's a hack attack where somebody just asks you so many dumb questions that it actually causes your server to get so busy answering stupid questions, it can't answer the real ones. It's actually a way to cause your server to melt down or to have some downtime. One of the ways that you don't want to just let anybody access your site, that is why we actually have some of these security methods. And one of the things that the system does is it creates what's called a security token. What that does is it actually, Luminate says to the remote server, hey, I'm pretty sure you're a real something. Here's a random string of numbers so that I can remember that you're a real something. I'm remembering on my side, just kind of, here's your temporary badge. It's like the hello, I am sticker that you pick up when you're just walking in the door. It's not really aggressive. It's not going to give us really good access to a whole lot. It may just be something as simple as what is the login URL? That is one of our commands that we can ask for, right? But you're actually a client as soon as you connect. And that's the difference between a malicious kind of random brainless bot on the internet and an actual person or website that's actually doing something, is they have become a client by getting that access token. And now we can at least ask some basic questions from them without them attacking us. All right, second question here is I ran into situations where even as an admin, I couldn't use a client service for my purposes like pulling gifts from a specific TeamRaiser participant because I wasn't the participant asking for it. That's exactly right. And so we'll step back into that right after getting through this LuminateExtend. But that's exactly where, so when you think about this stepping back, let's not think about like a computer. Let's just think about it from the kind of common sense standpoint, right? I've got a fundraiser. My aunt is running in the local 5K. And she has actually been sending out messages to her friends saying, hey, support me, come to my fundraising page and give me a gift, right? We don't want just anybody actually being able to see what she sent, who sent it to her, or to be able to send on her behalf. If we don't have a lockdown system, what would keep a bad guy from coming in and saying, hi, I'm your Aunt Cindy. Send me a Venmo to, Russian hacker Bitcoin.624 at whatever. That's where you have certain questions that come into our API where you really need to know this is absolutely Aunt Cindy. Heck, we trust the rest of our constituents, but we don't even want, Bob from across the street to kind of snoop in and be like, oh, I want to see who she's Facebook friends with. Maybe they'll give to me too, right? We want Aunt Cindy to be the only one who can see her stuff. So there's certain questions that we're going to ask the system. For example, I want to see a list of all the gifts that have been given to me. I need to know your Aunt Cindy. And we've got a couple different things that we have to do to prove when I'm Aunt Cindy in Microsoft Edge and I go to the website, am I really who I say I am? And there's some computery stuff happening in the background where Luminate is saying, okay, you gave me a password. Cool. I believe it. Yep. That's pretty good. And you're not like, you didn't give me that password years ago. Yep. Okay. That's good. Okay. And you want to know this. Yep. Okay. That's good. And it's saving a bunch of kind of behind the scenes stuff in the system. So a lot of times what we're going to see, and we're going to step right into this in a moment, is you actually have to start with one question. Like, for example, give me authenticate the user under our single sign-in, right? We actually need to get a token, most likely, proving that I'm a human being, right? And then I need to actually send the password and log in, right? And then I might want to check and make sure it worked right. And then once I've done all that, now I actually might go into my participant center and actually get a list of gifts, right? I can't remember right offhand if that's in the get donation or in the TeamRaiser, right? But what we're doing when we're working with the API is we actually have to think through that entire chain of custody of it starts out by proving you're not a bot. Then you have to prove, I'm logging in. Then you have to give me the right stuff and I need to make sure it works. Then we actually need to go in and see what you wanted me to do. And that's where some of these things happen on the client side. Just to kind of give you an example of where that might happen on the server side, let's say we wanted to create a custom process on my outside website that actually syncs GIFs. SOAP is one way we can do that, but it's just got a lot to it. It's a lot. We can actually use the REST API if we've got everything set up right. We could actually set up my website to actually use that server API and say, hey, can you send me a list of GIFs? And it can actually reach out and say, okay, here's the system. Let's establish I am who I say I am. And then you've got to build all the stuff to actually catch all that on the other end, right? So that's where the server stuff comes in. There's some things that I don't care how much I trust you and how many times I've looked at your ID. I just am not comfortable sending, the history of all credit card transaction verification codes that you've asked for ever. You need to be a computer. You need to be in the back end. And so that's where you see us break out between some of these things that are only meant for the client, the web browser, and other ones that are meant for really those computer systems in the background. Whew, that's an awful lot. Keep the questions coming. But as I promised, let's get in just a little bit into that kind of stack between what we have to do and how we ask these questions. The way to think about this, I've said it a couple times, is it's like a magic word. It's like a magic spell that you're casting, right? Let's see, get TeamRaisers by info here. So let's go to get TeamRaisers by info. Let's hope this works. That's fun. I don't know what it's going to do if I search. I don't usually use a search because I know where most of the stuff I want is. So it's all alphabetical. Everything's in TeamRaiser here. We're going to go get TeamRaisers by, what I say? By info. Okay, get TeamRaisers by info. Okay, so this is like a magic spell that I cast at the server. I say, get TeamRaisers by Info-Armis, and it has certain parameters that I need to pass on. If I just walked up to the person on the street and I was like, give me a list by info, your natural response is, what? Who are you? And then your second response, if you think about it, is, well, okay, by info, what info do you want, right? Luminate, TeamRaiser, Blackbaud, Gavio, whatever you want to call it, has get TeamRaisers by info as the base question. And then you actually have a whole range of details that you provide along with that question to tell it, here's the specific info I want, right? Get TeamRaisers by info happens to be one where we usually are doing, it's usually what you'd attach to a search box. You have a search box on your website saying search by zip code or search by name. Search by name is really meant for get TeamRaisers by info. What it lets you do is it lets you take a city or a country or a county or a list value or a part of the name, and you can actually use that as a regular text search or a specialized search. It will actually then go into the system, look through your list of TeamRaisers, see what qualifies, and spit back to you a certain set of details about what you just asked about. So get TeamRaisers by info is a good one when you're doing a text search. It's got a twin, which is get TeamRaisers by distance. Now that's a little different. And if we go back and forth and you just look right here in this section, you'll see all my words when I toggle back and forth are going to jump, because when you think about the logistics of doing a search by name of event, I want to do a search for 5K. That's the name. It's looking at the name field of the event and then it's saying, do I have anything that matches this? Whereas if I'm doing by distance, I care about zip code and actually care some specific things about zip codes. For example, zip codes should not have special characters in them. If they're Canadian or other countries, maybe they'll have letters or spaces in them, but they should be a certain length. If I have a 2-digit zip code, that's not really a zip code. So the system is actually built to use different commands if we're looking for zip code. And as you look through here, you'll see the starting postal code is one of those things. Okay. Here's where the plot thickens a little bit when you're actually trying to build something for your website. We'll loop back in a moment to kind of look at how to read these. But as you scroll down, one of the things I want to note is that you get a certain set of data when you use this magic word. That's what we'd expect, right? But guess what? This certain set of data is actually different than the set of data that you would get if you use the other question. So that's fun. So one of the things that you're doing when you're working on the API, and the reason why you're going to love this long list of different commands is, a lot of times when I'm building a website, all I know is I want to get the city and the date and the name of the event, maybe one other thing from my system to spit out onto my page, right? I may only be able to get 3 or 4 of those out of here. So like I said before, when we're doing the login, first I got to establish your bot, then I got to establish your password, then I got to establish it work, then I got to figure out what you want, then I got to figure out how to give it to you. In this case, when I wanted to get something like, let's say I wanted to get a logo of a sponsor for this event, I might actually have to pull this specific response, and the only thing that I can use in here is the event ID. But then I'm going to plug into a whole different event request. Imagine if there was a method that said, give me sponsor logos, give sponsor logos. And it wanted you to give the event ID, and then it spits out a list of the links to those sponsors and the links to their images, right? I would need to get that ID somehow, right? So again, you're chaining something. I might start out by saying, give me a list of all the events, and I'm going to look through that list and just schlep through and grab just the IDs. And then I'm going to take all that and then give it to a second request to say, show me all those logos. So really you're looking at 2 different things when you're looking at all these different methods. One is, what are the different questions you can ask to get more qualified answers? And then the second thing is, towards the bottom, what's it going to say back to you? And in between is a really good description, most of the time, of all the different questions you can ask. So like we're looking, I just grabbed a random one here, add gift. Okay, so happens to be one of the ones that works for both the client and the server, right? And that makes sense. If I donated through TeamRaiser website, I'm Grandma Smith, right? I'm using my web browser. I'm a client. I am not like a trusted person. I'm just sending in money. I need to be able to access this whole system to actually be able to send a gift to your system. So add gift does apply to that. But let's say I had an external system. I've got QuickBooks is somehow doing something very fancy, which I'm not saying you can do this, but like QuickBooks, maybe I entered checks in offline and it wanted to go ahead and send it into the system. And it actually has a whole system for that too. So the QuickBooks one would use the server and the client one would use the client. A lot of times, these will actually have pretty much the same list of possible like settings that you can do when you ask the question, but sometimes they are different. So again, that's where once you kind of go through this process of what I want to ask, how do I have to ask it, then you go and figure out what are the actual legal ways I can ask for it that the system will respond to me for. So what we're looking at here, you'll see almost every single one of these guys is going to start with the same block. Literally every API request you have is going to start with almost the exact same block of, it'll have your API key. Remember, we got that from over on Luminate, right? It'll have your value, which is something they probably, Yeah, it's probably true, actually. Something that is probably meant to be upgraded in the future, like 30 years ago. So they actually gave a version of it so you could do a 1.0 that in the future, maybe you would have a 2.0, right? Never ended up happening. Auth is that kind of secretly hidden token thing that proves that you're a human. And then you've got all kinds of details that tell us, we can see city, we can see check number, we can see sign redirects, we can see billing zip code, we can see credit card month. Those are all pretty logical things, right? And you'll see a long description of every single one of these, exactly what would the system expect. So you want to give me the fundraiser ID? Okay, and it tells me we've got this non-negative integer, which is to say I want a number, is what Luminate is saying. You want to ask me this, you need to give me FRID, and it needs to be a non-negative integer, right? Whereas the first name can be a string, random collection of letters, numbers, whatever, gift amount, and so on. So what you'll see in here is it starts out with what can you use this, then what kind of commands can you give, and it's trying to kind of give you a little feel for like what these commands will look like. So for example, you see here, this is professional suffix, and it says Esquire, MD, JD, PhD, DODS, DMVPE. It's kind of what all you really care about is this professional suffix part right here, and you will provide what you want in your code to be. So this is just trying to show you, okay, here is one setting in this bracket. The and sign tells me what this kind of setting this keyword is. And then the rest of this is just kind of some acceptable answers. And it's really just to make it human readable. To get the real detail, you scroll down a bit. Okay. To Simon's note that add gift is deprecated at this point. That's another great example of how really recently with all the PCI compliance, there's been a massive amount of change to this. And in that case, you'll actually see new notes. These are actually new within the last 6 months that actually are the Blackbaud engineers are trying to actually tell you, okay, 20 years ago, this is how it worked. It was pretty straightforward. We've had to make a lot of changes. Here's how it works. We've added new stuff. We've added a whole workflow. We've got a logic chart. Read through it. Let's not parse it right now. But there's your 1,000-foot view of exactly how to go through these. And you're going to see across the entire system, you'll see it fairly similar. Sometimes it wraps the code, other times it doesn't. But you're going to see basically some notes for here's how you can use it. The parameters are those different settings you can use. And then some examples of what it's going to say back to you, right? We'll get into let's see what I've got next, and we'll make it up as we go. All right. So that's how you read through the manual at a 1,000-foot view. The things that you're going to need to do to get set up, like I showed before, was getting that API key. That's going to be in literally every single request that you ever ask for. It's always in here. You'll always see API key value, and it's always going to be the same thing. It's that one that we looked at on the other side, okay? Your whitelist is actually, again, saying these are the verified sites we trust to go ahead and ask questions. The page wrapper is where you're going to put that LuminateExtend and all of the code that you've got that spits out what's on the page. Like I showed, this page builder is where you're going to save the magic little security stuff. And then where you're going to have your HTML, your CSS, and your specific logic for the API calls, that may live inside TeamRaiser. Most of the time, it's actually probably going to be a dedicated page in your page builder or in a JavaScript file that you've written separate. But that's kind of where all these different pieces go. Okay. Let's get into a good example here of some actual code that you can use. Everybody who's attended, I think I'll probably get a list of your email addresses. Ask your CSM if you want to get a copy of this deck, but I will also be happy to send along to you and ask any questions that you want. LuminateExtend is a great way to do this whole system, but what I wanted to show off is you don't have to use LuminateExtend. You could actually write plain old JavaScript that could give you the exact same thing that LuminateExtend is doing without a lot of that extra stuff. LuminateExtend makes it very easy, for one, for you to do a lot in a little bit of time. Two, very importantly, to let somebody else who's just walking into the situation later when you're on sick leave or on vacation have a clue what you've done without reading through all this and being like, what am I looking at, right? LuminateExtend is great for that, but you can actually create a simple, you can actually create a pure JavaScript API request. And that's kind of what I've put together here. There's an S tag S86. Remember earlier I said there's this token. It's like that name badge. It's the little, okay, I'm pretty sure you're not nothing, but it's not a lot more trust than that. It's just, this is kind of, hello, my name is Bob, right? That's a token. It gets saved into your browser, and we have to have a system for you to request that. So get token is the method. You'll actually be able to find it in here. I think it's in constituent, I think. Get token, I don't know. We'd search through the system, but you'll find out somewhere in here. So, yeah, rather than getting too stuck up on it. What we're going to do is we're basically just going to say, here's the API key. We're going to figure out what is the address that we're asking at this from. Where am I targeting, right? So each one of these has a very specific location that you send the request to. It's this web address, right? So in my JavaScript here, we're basically going to look at the JavaScript on the browser and spit that out. And then we're going to put together what's called an HHR request. And that's just how the APIs talk to each other. It's sent across the internet in the background. Don't worry too much about this. This is all copy pastable code right now. If I were to take all of this code right now and I go into any website that actually has the API set up and I know their key, I can actually go ahead and copy and paste this into my JavaScript console because this is a client untrusted kind of request. I could actually paste this in right now and it would actually reply automatically to tell me if I've got that API key. It'll actually tell me automatically, here is our actual token, and I've actually kicked off that process to prove that I am a person. Or if you don't want to do all this stuff, just in Page Builder, use the S86 tag true, and it'll spit out the exact same thing this whole thing is built to do. But it can be useful to actually have a system that can do this. So this is that very first step in that long process is you're going to create a get token. And I'm just glancing through this. Okay, now I know why. Okay, I said get token. Get token is what I actually called my little thing I built here. The request we're actually talking about is get login URL. So this is an implementation for get login URL, which lives inside of the system, and it is hiding too. So maybe that one's gotten deprecated as well. That's fine. All right, well, anyway, we're gonna pretend I didn't, yeah. That's the really simple. Prove I'm a human. Basically execute this SA6 tag and give me the name badge, right? We can also get quite a bit more complicated. Once we start chaining one thing onto the other, exactly as I was talking before, you could actually create a TeamRaiser event list. This is basically, this is like code that I'd done when I was at Zero Cancer and our endurance program. And it's two different ways of spitting out into HTML. These are both powered by the API with the get TeamRaisers by info request, right? The way I built this code, and you can actually, here's another cool thing about working in the API, go look at my website. Go look at the code, go look at the JavaScript. You can actually see exactly how I built this entire thing at any time. You'll see it's built on the get TeamRaiser by info, which basically went out and it said, give me the names of addresses, give me the URLs, give me the FRIDs, give me sponsor logo number 1, give me event date, right? And it just went out and requested those things. And then I process it through JavaScript. I spit it out into HTML, and bada bing, we actually create the exact same thing in two different systems. Once you've kind of got rolling, the sky's the limit for what you can do. You want to chain, now that I know these events, wouldn't it be cool if I could actually get a list of all the people who are participating in this event and actually view all the people in the event? Well, let's just see. By stacking what we know about the first piece of information, in this case, mainly the FRID, there's a second request that actually says get participants. And if I click on it, we can actually have the API fill this out and grab all kinds of details about those participants, right? So in this particular case, the way I built it is a little sidebar. In this case, I don't necessarily, if I hit register, I know this one's open for registration, so we can actually go straight to the registration. But on the other ones where they're not actually open for registration, I still want to be able to donate to one of these participants, and it spits it out, right? And you can see some of the stuff we're doing with the API. We can grab their TeamRaiser photo. There's TeamRaiser photo command. If they're a team, you can actually grab a team photo if there's one set, right? You can grab the name of their team. You can grab something that goes directly to their webpage, right? You can grab all kinds of cool stuff. And we're just stacking based on that first request. That all it did was ask, give me a list of the different events from which I grab those IDs. And then I feed it into the next request, show me everybody. And then once I get the result of everybody, I've got a bunch of constituent IDs, and I say, okay, now feed that into the system and get me their photos. Feed that into the system and get me who the team captain is. And I can just stack thing upon thing upon thing. This is what it looks like when we're doing that. And I'm taking a look at the time here. We're at 4 minutes. Wowie zowie. Go ahead and hit the chat right now, though, if you have any questions that you want to make sure I don't miss. Otherwise, I'm going to have this deck, but there's a lot more to get through. But here's what it looks like on a machine level when I ask for a list of events. I did a little bit of code to actually color code things at the top to let me know based on the JavaScript response. Again, take a look at Serial Cancer's endurance website, and you'll be able to actually see the code that generated all of this. But it gives a readout, and you can see it's just a bullet list. Like I said before, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is just each of those events. I asked for get TeamRaisers by info, giving it the list category ID 1141, which is our endurance, was their endurance list category. And it gives you just that list. Once I've got that, I can actually expand these if I know what I'm looking at, and you can find out on each one of these. Jumping too fast. Each one of these list items has a dropdown that has all of these details in the response, right? We got a get TeamRaiser's response. It's got street amount, county, city, mailing address, county, country, ID, state, so on, right? You remember before we had been looking at the get TeamRaisers by info, and you'll notice if I find it, this is exactly the same as this list, right? I'm actually seeing this directly in the browser. We're not going to have time to get to it, but one of the things once you've kind of gotten used to using APIs is you'll want to actually be able to use your developer console to actually do your code and see what is the communication happening behind the scenes. When I look at any website, I can actually inspect this guy, and I can actually look at our network and see when I load the page, all the different connections that were made to the remote servers, including all of my API calls. When I click on the XHR here, you can see the details of exactly what was spit out, including the request, the response, and all kinds of other stuff that you don't need to worry about, right? But in short, we can actually get everything about these. And so the process of getting something like this is you make a request for the list, then you make some code that's going to go through that list and looks for all those different pieces of information. And then it's going to basically do some sort of a command to make it go and get all the details that we want to spit out on the page. LuminateExtend, that library I was talking about before. Here's a really basic example of how it works. What LuminateExtend does is it takes the pandemonium that I would have to write to get all of this extra code, right? And it condenses it down to something really simple. So get TeamRaisers by info. I've cut out some things, but at its core, all you have to do once you've got LuminateExtend built in is you say, I want an API request to the TeamRaiser API. Here are the specific commands that I want in the settings. And then once you respond, I want you to go ahead and do some other stuff, right? And this is just simple JavaScript. This is jQuery right here. You'll see it says, contact this, take the data, run this little command on it for data. Don't worry about what that is. And then on each of the answers, once you've filtered out the list, go do a bunch of stuff to spit out that page. All right, y'all. Really quick then, let me jump forward to some of the tools that we're going to have in the goodie bag. take a look at each of these links once you've got the thing, and take a look. There's lots of documentation with all of this. If you have any questions, be sure to actually follow up with me too. But you can use all kinds of cool tools, including Postman. And I think we're past time, so it very well may be shutting us off. But if anybody's still here, uh, Postman is a great little tool for checking what you get when you send things. WADL is a really machine-built list of all the different commands and a little more explanation of what they are. There's this cool little GitHub I found that actually let you test and see what things are available when you ask things from the system. And of course, the documentation. Whew, awful lot going on there. Sorry that we're out of time for a Q&A. Feel free, though, to contact me at any time. My email address is jeremy.reynolds@streetlightdigital.com. I love to talk, as you could probably see. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Take a look at my GitHub. I've actually got started on some of those events. And yeah, there you be.
That's awesome, Jeremy. Thank you for getting us through all of that awesome content. I know you've been answering a couple of questions as we've gone. I'm popping your email address in the chat in case people want to grab that easily. And thank you. And folks, I did launch a survey. So just before you drop off, it'd be really, really wonderful if we can get everyone who attended today to fill in that survey. Really helpful for Jeremy. There's a prize for the best survey. So let's give Jeremy the best feedback we can here and thank him for all of this awesome content today. I hope you can all take away some good nuggets from it. Jeremy, thank you. Thank you for participating and sharing all this goodness with Blackbaud and all our customers. So thank you. And thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of the sessions. Have a great one.
Take care, everyone.